And we are recording on Thursday, May 18th, 2023 at 3:10 p.m. Eastern Time with his second appearance, Mr. Lee Slusher. And he asked me how I was doing, and I just vented to him really how disillusioned I've become with this whole podcast and what succeeds online and what doesn't. And despite that, I'm still gonna discuss this stuff because if I start discussing that which I think turns your brain to oatmeal, I too will become oatmeal, and I don't want to be oatmeal. So, although 900,000 people want to hear about Tom Brady and Kim Kardashian moving into the same cul-de-sac as him, we're going to discuss Ukraine, Taiwan, Russia, and I don't know the imminent threat of the imminent threat of World War III, which seems to be a little more pressing. And I'm starting to think life might be more enjoyable if I was dumber. And as as
Probably,
as
probably.
Lee's just sitting there going like, is Tommy, is he about to snap? Am I just like the unlucky last guest of the show before I'm just start screaming? And you're like, I don't, Tommy, I'm not a therapist. I'm not equipped for this. But
No, I've been there, man. I've told old friends and colleagues that if my consulting business didn't work out, I was just going to go be a mailman. I wasn't going to return to government or
I'm
do any of that.
I'm actually starting to think
Yeah.
that there are enlightened Buddhas in this world who are just chopping deli meat and
Mhm.
like, or just delivering, or just they're just picking up garbage. And you might
Sure.
look at them and be like, that's why I work hard. They might be on a different plane. Might have hit nirvana. They might have hit like the bodhisattva state, and they have understood that there is nothing in this world but to be present in the current moment. And they're looking at us and shaking their head and feeling bad. And anyway, can you real quick? Can you for the people that are like, is Tommy all right, man? Tommy, what's in that cup? Are you? I'm just slurring my words. I'm like, listen, this is another fucking thing I gotta say. Could you introduce yourself real quick for the people that didn't watch the last episode?
Sure. Lee Slusher. For about the past 25 years, I've worked in intelligence and geopolitical analysis. Started off in the US Army. I was what's called a cryptologic linguist for Russian, Serbo-Croatian, and Farsi, Afghan Farsi, Dari. Got out of the Army, worked for the intelligence community for a while. Uh, did about four deployments to Afghanistan, one to Iraq. Spent a number of years with the Army's asymmetric warfare group, and nearly seven with the Johns as a subcontractor with the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab doing national security analysis. And for about the past five, I've had my own company, BT Consulting. And last year, I created a Substack, which is Deep Dive with Lee Slusher.
Let me make sure I have that Substack in the description. I hope. Let's see. Make sure I do. Yeah, Substack in there. BT Consulting,
Yep.
and remember early on when I was doing this podcast, I always put people's links, whatever they want, Twitter, website, company in the description. And I was lucky enough to interview Mike Durant,
Mm,
the Black Hawk Down pilot,
sure.
Black Hawk Down, and he has his own defense contractor company called Pinnacle Solutions, where I think they retrofit helicopters for special forces and stuff, and kind of refurbish them, save money. And I remember I had him on, and I was like, I was so used to already just plugging people's websites, and I was so nervous to have him on that I was like, yeah, and if you guys, I was like, yeah, if you need some business, go to Pinnacle Solutions. And I think he emailed me after and was like, I don't think your average listener is like buying a Black Hawk. And I was like, shit. But he was cool about it. He
But they
laughed.
might want to.
But they might want to, and
Yeah,
I cover all bases here on TPC. You know what? You might
that's
not
right.
have the money or the legal authority to buy a stealth helicopter to go invade Pakistan, but if you want to, I'm not going to leave you hanging. Um, but so because we talked a lot about Taiwan last time, and I think maybe the more recent news is yesterday or the day before. It seems to be the more surface level hot topic of the war, and this might be something that is akin to clicking on a Kardashian thumbnail where it might not be indicative of what's going on under the surface, but it seems to be the more attention grabbing thing is that I think a Patriot missile battery failed to shoot down not even hypersonic, not the Kinzhal, but supersonic Russian missiles. Is that indicative of a bigger picture, or is that kind of just an attention grabbing topic?
It's a little of both. A lot of people are focusing on some of the videos, and I don't think we've yet to receive any kind of authoritative analysis. I mean, there are competing ideas, uh, but I think it's pretty clear that it didn't necessarily function as intended, because
Mm.
even the DoD admitted that it was at least damaged. I mean, that's their line. So
Yeah.
something happened, and
Yeah.
just basically Winchestered all of its missiles.
Yeah.
It, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
They're admitting that, then something worse has happened.
sure. But I definitely think that it just happens to be indicative of the broader situation. So everybody's looking at this or waiting for this counteroffensive from Ukraine, trying to decide, has it happened? Is it happening? I think it's yet to be seen whether it happens and how much they can actually do. Now, the government in Kiev has had no reluctance to sacrifice large numbers of men and probably billions of dollars worth of materiel. I don't doubt that they would order something again. My concern or my curiosity is over what they can actually do. Because over the past couple of weeks, well, Russia's been systematically degrading Ukraine's combat capability for a very long time. But over the past couple of weeks, they've just been nailing all of these ammo dumps, all of this stuff the West provided that was meant, was promised initially in, the Ramstein conference back in January, and it's meant for this big spring offensive, and Russia just keeps annihilating it. So it's a real question: how much do they have, and what can they do, and what are they willing to do? We don't get a whole lot of insight into the actual destruction that's ongoing, that's happened, both in terms of people and infrastructure and all of it, but it's extensive. So of the people who are left, how many of them actually want to participate in this and sacrifice themselves in this
Yeah.
upcoming offensive? There's some pretty reasonable online speculation that maybe this is the Ukrainians are feeding some information in the hopes of kind of derailing this thing, but because they know that the slaughter would begin again. And I think some of that's pretty reasonable given the close ties between the two. I mean, Ukraine has always been infiltrated by Russia.
Ukraine feeding
To the
information
Russians.
so feeding information to the Russians about the ammo dumps.
Yeah, and again, this is speculation, but
Sure.
I'm only sharing it because I think it's reasonable speculation. Given the extent of the loss that has occurred thus far, and the fact that whatever it is they might have planned, it's not going to amount to much, and who really wants to die for that? So I think that's pretty reasonable speculation. Whether it's true or not, we simply don't know, but it seems reasonable. Like I said, I'm kind of unconvinced that they really can mount anything substantial, but we'll see if it even pops off at all. So.
There is, and it's kind of more so than normal. Speculation is almost warranted because fog of war and then ongoing propaganda. And I don't even mean that in a say in a toxic of propaganda. No, propaganda is part of the war. I'm not an idiot. Just as troop movements and shipping MREs is part of the movement, so is propaganda. So
Sure.
you never know what the hell is happening because there's propaganda is a powerful weapon. You don't have to fire a shot if you can get in the mind of someone, be it a false offensive or just getting in the minds of the population back at home. Yeah, I mean, if you're Ukrainian and you want to feed them, because on one hand, if you feed them information about ammo dumps and they hit your ammo dumps, that might prolong the support you get from the West. You might be looking at it as like, we need to make them still think the war is happening, but there might be the other idea of like, yeah, like there is no winning this. We all know how it's going to end is just throwing more men into the meat grinder, and you might have Ukrainian guys going, yeah, I'm in their mind, they might be, and they're not even necessarily wrong. They might be thinking, the quicker I bring this to an end, the more of my own countrymen I'm going to save. And if that means feeding information to the Russians on the surface, they're treasonous, they might not be wrong.
And another take is that Russia doesn't actually want to destroy the country. And so if they can degrade the capability to such an extent that the counteroffensive either can't happen or is completely ineffectual, then that's to their advantage as well. Because they really could have unleashed with much more. I mean, there could be a lot more destruction. I know that's not a popular view in the West, but Russia has shown a great deal of constraint. And so it could simply be that they're trying to be very systematic in degrading combat capability.
Well, I think that would make perfect sense because if you look at how much restraint the United States showed in the Middle East, and you might go, well, not really. I mean, we killed 1 million people compared to what we could do. I mean, by sunset of September 11th, 01, Afghanistan could have been an irradiated glass ice rink, right? It's so there is restraint, and that's not even an area that we were trying to annex. Now, let's say you actually wanted to take a territory, you would probably show even more restraint.
Yeah, I mean they're basically cousins, and many of the people in Ukraine are essential Ukrainian in name only. They speak Russian, identify as Russian, so it's not like they're on the other side of the globe with people that are somewhat dehumanized. I mean,
Mm.
they're neighbors and relatives essentially. So it makes sense that they don't want to completely wreck the place. But yeah, you mentioned propaganda, and I see people routinely discount the importance of deception in warfare. Like Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner group, he's constantly making all of these media appearances, saying all kinds of crazy things, and people try to read into it. And I just think that's more deception. That's him filling the information space with nonsense because it works and it distracts people.
Yeah.
Something I've written for a long time. Um, Russia has a pretty well established history of killing dissidents both in the country and outside of the country,
Hmm.
including in NATO countries and including with weapons that we could trace back to Russia.
Yeah, polonium.
The idea, right, exactly. The idea that they couldn't rein in Prigozhin in Bakhmut if they wanted to is farcical. Now, I don't doubt that he ruffles feathers, but my general take, again, and it's inconclusive because we're all operating at an information deficit, but my general take is that this is part of a deception plan. He
Yeah.
just says all kinds of crazy things. We don't have shells, and or there's a story at Washington Post that he's going to turn over information to the Ukrainians. I mean, it's all just crazy.
You gotta love you gotta love like the armchair generals that we're seeing online. And it's just like, I mean, it's childish. They're like, we should withdraw all of our forces and then come back in the middle of the night. And you're like, what the hell are you? Do you not think that this has been war planned for centuries, like decades and centuries and billions of dollars of planning? And I tend to agree with you. If he was stepping really out of line, he would have died in a very obvious fashion to send a message, right?
Or been disappeared, or
He would have fallen and tripped and been impaled by a Russian flag.
right, or even a more delicate version, he reappears in Moscow and basically starts saying things that sound like they were fed to him.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
all sorts of the idea that he's just running off at the mouth with no constraint, and Russia has no ability to stop it.
Yeah, no,
Really,
his family
just
members' body parts would be FedEx Express shipped to the UN. Like that's what would happen. And it's yeah. So I do think to zoom out even more, and by zooming out, I often just have this image of like Dr. Strangelove and like just some cold antiseptic nuclear bunker of just pure detached. That idea of we're looking at 40 to 50 million deaths, Mr. President, in
mhm.
acceptable loss. I always go to like that just detached surgical nature. I have a friend whose husband is an ER surgeon, and she's like he's very like distant and kind of detached, and that's what makes him so good at it. Is because you have to be right. I think it's
Mhm.
pretty much like I don't think it's necessarily a law, but it's pretty like assumed in the medical community that if you're a surgeon, you'll never operate on like a loved one. Yeah, you can't. You have to be detached, and it sounds cold, but you have to be because that's how you're gonna kind of treat it like a I don't know, like an auto repairman. You're just looking at it as a machine, and that's going to probably give you the highest percent chance of saving the life. So I always kind of look at these super detached mindset of like a Doctor Strange love. You're looking at it, and they might be looking at this and going, "We need to keep grinding down Russia and just throwing billions of dollars of weapons and just and hundreds of thousands of men to into an oblivious death." Because, and they're not necessarily wrong, this is a pretty decent flex on China and Taiwan to be like, man, they're throwing everything at this shitty backwoods kind of like neo-Nazi corrupt former Soviet bloc nation. What are they going to do to a country that produces the most advanced, I guess, fabrication techniques on the planet? Do you think there's any credence to that?
I don't think there should be.
No,
No,
no, no. I don't. By the way, I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
I don't agree with this. I should put that out there. I don't think it's good.
Well, no, I think it's likely there are some people who believe that. But the reason I think they're off base is this hasn't degraded Russia. What we see now is the largest, most capable Russian military in many decades, not just on paper, but in terms of experience. They have mobilized, they have hundreds of thousands of people. Their defense industrial base is cranking around the clock. They just have this gigantic force that now has the most combat experience in high intensity warfare of any army on the planet. It's bigger than it was. It's more experienced than it was. So if the goal was to degrade Russia, they failed on that.
All right, let's pivot. And no, and it is an important. I normally always throw that out there. I forgot to. Is I don't condone or believe this is right, but I think it's probably happening, and that's the whole mindset of. So maybe not grind down Russia so much as show that we will throw everything into this hellish shithole that is the war, because so it's not grinding down Russia, it's that we won't back down even in a completely insane and seemingly unwinnable war. Is that itself almost sending a signal to China?
It sends a signal to anyone who doesn't scratch the surface. I think we talked about this before, but I can't recall the logistical aspects that we don't have the defense industrial base we used to. We don't even have the industrial base we used to. So and we're basically emptying the shelves and sending things over there to Ukraine. So what could we send to Taiwan? Well, certainly not anything that's been destroyed or expended in Ukraine. So I don't think it sends the message to anyone who's savvy on that. Like I said before, there's been a lot of consolidation in the defense sector, such that we don't have the production capability we used to. We don't even have the broader industrial capability that we used to. So to ramp up production, I mean, what would it require? To invoke the Defense Production Act, to print a rather a large fortune, to pay for rearming the country, and then it would take a significant amount of time to build up the materiel necessary to start some other conflict, much less to sustain one over time. So I don't think our adversaries or potential adversaries are unaware of that. So there's within the op-ed world and online, people talk like that, but I'm less concerned. Well, people talk about what we should do, and I'm very focused on what we could do realistically. And when we look at that, I don't think we have the power to back that play. And when you look at our military too, the formations we have, the material we have on hand, we're not in a position to be that bold. Now, that doesn't mean our leaders won't put us in that position, but it's very unwise and very, very dangerous at present.
I mean, is this almost like a natural balancing of the planet where it's easy for us to look at things and they seem eternal, like when they're longer than 10 years. It's like, well, it'll always be that way, right? Or that will always be the tallest building,
I
or
think you're right.
LeBron will always be the all-star. And okay, but as you zoom out more and more, you realize just how we've been here for 250 years. And it's like, yeah, man, but there are empires that last thousands of years. And, I don't think it's too absurd to assume that we had this ungodly, almost unfathomable momentum and industrial might after World War II. And it seems forever. My whole lifetime, my parents' whole lifetime, my grandparents, like, of just invincible America. So it seems like that's an eternity. That's 3 generations. But then you just zoom out on even modern Homo sapien. 3 generations is a blink of an eye. That's snapping your fingers, right?
Sure.
And we might have existed in this bubble of just ungodly might and we've been projecting that force around the globe, and now it's waning, and it's the end of the American Empire, and how are we going to do this? This might be the natural state of things, of where you can't do endless wars. This is how empires dies. You are trying to run the world with a limited number of people, and you're trying to, at very worst, conscript other people to fight for you, who will eventually will turn on you. Or in our case, we're trying to do it economically. And this might be the natural state where, and so let's now say like China's rising, right? And let's say in 50 years, they're the hegemon. And then they run shit for 80 years after that. So in 50 years from now, it'll be 2073. And then let's say they run it for another 80 years after that, which would be 2053. Or no, sorry, 2153. And then they might start waning. And the people there would go, I can't believe the Chinese Empire is ending. But if you zoom out to thousands of years, like, no, this is what happens is you get massive. You hit your apex, like a LeBron James, a Tom Brady, you hit your stride, you do become almost a god on the field, but eventually your win percentage goes down and you retire, and then a new person comes along. And so it could be that this is actually a natural equilibrium of no, like you can't, doesn't matter how advanced you are or how sexy the B-21 Raider is. It kind of does just come to, I'm friends with some Delta Force guys, man. And they always say, regardless of every technology you have, it always comes down to the guy in the field with a gun. That's really all it is. And it's kind of a humbling thing to be like, we have Space Force and the X-37B and the successor to the SR-71 Blackbird. And then you go and you look at a video on like the front in Ukraine, and it's a guy using a water-cooled Vickers from World War One with a laser hollow sight on it. And you're like, that hasn't really advanced much. And it might be that there's almost some natural law of you really can't run the world forever. And we're kind of just seeing that law manifest itself. I don't know if I had any coherent thought in that rant that you can pick up on, but
No, I understood because Jordan was the hero when I grew up, not LeBron. So I've seen
point,
things.
point take, yes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. My broader thesis right now is that whether we want to call it the post World War II order or the post Cold War order, that it's basically coming to an end, and that all the components of that system are kind of failing, or they'll have to adapt somehow. So yeah, I'm completely on the same page there. That's a lot of what we're seeing. In terms of the military stuff, it's really worth noting that for the past 20 years, until very recently at least, we were busy fighting the Flintstones, right? And then the parts of the military, I've heard people say that. It's not, I can't.
No, that's great.
Yeah, but and the parts of the military that weren't directly involved in that effort kind of atrophied, or they didn't get a lot of attention, or the level of funding they would have otherwise. And meanwhile, other countries, namely Russia and China, they've all been focusing on things like electronic warfare and hypersonics, things that really matter. They watched the Gulf War happen. They watched this massive US-led coalition pick apart one of the largest armies on the planet without a whole lot of difficulty. And they said, well, we can't match that capability in joint warfare on the ground. So they all started developing other capabilities. And we're seeing right now that they really invested wisely. We see Russian electronic warfare jamming HIMARS and jamming JDAMs and things like that. The decisions that brought us to this place have unfolded over decades, and we can't turn those things around on a dime. So it's important to look at what the other guys have been doing over the past decades, and they've been investing in a lot of this stuff. So the technology does matter, but not all of it matters. So, for example, the proliferation of precision strike and precision targeting and navigation, all that stuff matters a great deal. And we're seeing it in Ukraine in particular. It's not just that Russia has tremendous overmatch in artillery, both tube artillery and rocket artillery, firing from behind the guys on the front. Some of that artillery is precision guided, and then over those heads, both from aircraft and from missile subs and missile boats both in the Black and the Caspian Seas, they're all firing cruise missiles that go right over the heads of the guys in the army. Sometimes these missiles, particularly in the past week or two, have gone far into the western part of Ukraine, destroying a lot of ammunition dumps and things of that sort. So the technology matters when it's decisive. I know that's that's an obvious thing, but we're seeing examples of it play out in terms of precision, long range fires. That stuff really matters.
How do you think it's going to escalate then? Because so everything we're talking about seems rational, right? And now I'm just kind of looking at the psychotic power of those in charge, and they're not bound to rationality or ethics or really anything, right? They're a drunk guy with a huge bat, and doesn't mean it should happen. It means probably will happen if you try to take the drunk guy's bat away.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think this escalates? Do you think that there's an inflection point where we go too far and we do something in Russia, or vice versa? They go too hard and go, all right, you're supplying the Ukraine, you are at war with us, and they hit a train of American goods, and that's our Lusitania or Pearl Harbor or something.
I've written about this quite a bit over the past, I don't know, 6 or 8 months on my Substack. So I think there are two broad possibilities. One is that there's some kind of direct Western intervention, because everything they're doing right now is indirect. Or most of it, it's a proxy war. But
Officially.
if officially, right. Um, so if there's a direct intervention, and I think that would be disastrous, but many people have called for it. If there is one, and this, whether it's NATO or some Western-led coalition of the willing, that could easily provoke an escalation, in which case all bets are off and nobody knows. It could go nuclear in that circumstance. So, because when I hear people talk about nuclear war right now relating to Russia and Ukraine, they always do so in the abstract. They don't define the specific military conditions under which Russia would actually employ a nuclear weapon. And if we had a Western-led coalition that started to go, let's say, into advance into Ukraine on the Russian border, how do the Russians know that that's simply a mission, say, to retake Ukraine, or a mission for regime change in Russia? Many Western leaders have called for regime change. Many others have said Russia needs to be dismembered. So from their side, how are they realistically supposed to know? So, like I said, two possibilities. One is a Western intervention that sparks escalation, in which case it could get really bad. The other one is that Russia wins decisively enough to set the terms of peace. And I'm obviously rooting for number two, but they're in it. Russia's completely in a position to do that, right? They're dominating. They're slowly building up all of this combat capability, because basically they went in last year too light and with insufficient tenacity to kind of achieve their goals. They had to go effect this huge military mobilization. In the meantime, the Wagner group had to kind of carry a lot of the water. But a lot of people's perception of the war is still stuck in spring of last year, and it shouldn't be, because they've mobilized hundreds of thousands of people. They have a really elaborate network of defenses all along this very large front. They have a huge and growing number of troops. There are more troops across the borders in Russia and Belarus. They have tremendous overmatch in artillery, not just the tube and the rocket stuff, but also in the long range precision fires. They've been degrading Russia or Ukraine's air defense and artillery capability, but at some point they're going to have air superiority or something very close to it, because right now they're firing the standoff weapons, but there isn't that much left. They've destroyed a couple of Ukrainian armies already. So basically, if we avoid that Armageddon scenario, and I keep sharing these two articles from my Substack. That one is called Amateur Hour Armageddon, that explains that possibility. And the other one is Rubble and Rhetoric. Many people died for nothing. And that explains how, in pretty good detail, how Russia has actually been doing over the course of the war versus what we've been told. We've been told at various points that Ukraine was winning or that it could win. All of this was nonsense. So I think in most endeavors, but particularly in analytical ones, it's important to focus on fundamentals, right? And if the fundamentals don't make sense, one needs to stop and re-examine them until they do, or else everything else is going to be faulty. It was always foolish to think Ukraine could beat Russia. Now, a lot of people out there are going to disagree, people with much larger platforms than mine. It doesn't matter. It was always ridiculous. People like to indulge these David and Goliath stories. They want to root for the underdog, but that's most of the time not what happens. And it isn't. And if we look, and that's not to say that any kind of Russian victory would be swift, because the history of Russian military operations is really not that. It's usually that something happens and they kind of come back around again. Like they leveled Grozny and settled the Second Chechen War after kind of having marched away after the first one, right? So Russia is now mobilized. They are ready, and they don't know what tasks remain for them. Do they simply need to defeat the remaining Ukrainians, or do they need to be prepared to fight a potential Western intervention? They're preparing for both. So all the people who are looking at the situation and saying, "Oh, why couldn't they take Bakhmut sooner?" or "They haven't really taken much more land," they're missing the point. Russia is amassing a huge force with massive stockpiles of materiel, intricate defenses, all because they don't know who the enemy necessarily is going to be. Is it this proxy army, or is it an actual Western intervention? Again, leaders all across the West have called for regime change, the dismemberment of Russia. It would be foolish of them to think all they have to do is defeat Ukraine. So they're being much more deliberate. The plan is much broader in scope. And so that kind of mobilization takes time. And so they've been taking their time. But meanwhile, they keep just degrading the hell out of everything the Ukrainians have. And so it's, I think a lot of people's perception of the war is still stuck in the spring of last year.
And it's such an odd thing to see people like cheering on each side.
Oh, it's bizarre.
Like it's
Yeah,
the
I'm not for or against either side. I
no,
mean, I'm against my government's role in the proxy war, but that's a specific opinion as an American. I'm not for or against Russia or Ukraine, and it is very bizarre.
it's very, and I don't even mean this in some delusional, naive way. I mean, I understand the world's not a happy place. You have to have ungodly deterrent forces. I get that. I know we can't all hold hands. And I also say that as someone who's most of my life has been very rah rah America, and then the more, ironically enough, not hippies I interview, but the more former military guys I interview who have served for decades in special forces or navy or whatever, and you start to realize like, no man, like that there is no glory in that. There's real cost to it, and you should defend your borders. And if there is some truly unjust thing like Hitler in concentration camps, yeah, you got to go intervene. But watching it now of people just like cheering, like drone videos on Twitter of like a POV little mortar being dropped on a Russian soldier, and you have people being like, "Score one for the good guys," and it's like, dude, like, or I remember seeing one video of it was a blurry drone video, but it was a guy who was hit by shrapnel. This was like last fall or something, and he's clearly bleeding out in a field, and he's squirming.
That's the end for him. Yeah.
And the top comment, no irony, the top comment on Reddit, which I've been banned from for about 5 years now, permanent IP ban, straight up can't even get back on multiple
Oh,
accounts.
wow.
Oh, I did a number, and
Okay.
yeah, no,
We'll have to talk about that sometime.
yeah, no, it's that was, yeah. I mean, I'm not even mad. I'm kind of impressed at their ability to ban me even as I move states. It's I did something, and, but the top comment was, "Is this Russian or Ukrainian? Because I don't know whether to cheer or to grieve." And no awareness, no irony in the comment that because it was blurry, you really couldn't tell who it was, and you needed to know whether to grieve or to cheer. And it's like, Jesus Christ in heaven. And this idea that it reminds me a lot of and I need to re-listen to it, Dan Carlin's Blueprints for Armageddon.
Oh, I love that.
Oh I've told
It's
that
it's probably my favorite series of all
I've
time.
told people it's better than I've in 2 years.
Yeah.
I've kept track. I've listened to 111 audiobooks, and I only history. I don't listen to anything else. That is better than any audiobook I've ever listened to. It's a six
Hmm.
part, 4 hours each series about World War One. Go find it. It is the best book you'll ever listen to. And but there are so many parallels between that, and not even the
Yeah.
obvious ones of like not realizing you're walking into war, but primarily the personal stories of these guys who, I mean, you grow up in 1905 Europe, like, yeah, your experiences of the world are probably pretty limited. And they're all talking about the great adventure of going to war. And we're
Mhm.
going to war and we're gonna do the whatever and come home and get the girl. And then they talk about getting there and they're like, and they get to the first war and like some bullets go by and there's a guy talking about how they were like yelling at the enemy. They're like, do you kiss your mother with that mouth, or something funny. And then his friend next to him, his head's taken off, and all of a sudden you realize you're in war, and there was no one cheering. Where you got to the front and you're like, let's go take out the Germans, and you see your other buddies there who got there a week before you, and there's like no color in their face, and they're staring at you like, shut up, get your head down. And it very clearly becomes, it's 2023 and we have Uber Eats and Snapchat and all this propaganda and modern propaganda. And there's TikTok, Slava Ukrainian, influencers are putting it in their cappuccino. It's still the same high velocity lead projectiles ripping people apart.
A great
And
many people.
that's real. And my only hope is that sobering reality cuts through all the horse shit of all the inspirational posts and all the Starbucks stands with Ukraine. Like, no, man, what this really is
It's a slaughter.
are people being ripped apart into hamburger meat and their parents are burying them. And it's nothing more and nothing less than that.
Mhm.
And who knows, man? Maybe it's just that has to keep happening before this ends. I don't know.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I mean, I'm not a pacifist. The world is a
No,
danger. It's a
yeah,
dangerous place, and sometimes violence is the answer. But
yes,
we need a really damn good reason why it is.
yeah.
And I don't see how this is one. Like in what vital national security interest was it of ours? They start tossing around terms, freedom and democracy and all of that. Anyone who's really familiar with Ukraine knows that it's every bit as corrupt as Russia. I
Yes.
mean, I've traveled around the whole region many times. This whole thing was put on by our leaders, and it was done as a matter of policy. Now that's how the U.S. has been fighting wars for a long time. Of course, we haven't formally declared war in the constitutional fashion since World War II, but it doesn't lessen at least my anger or the nature of the problem that we're instigating or participating in these wars all as a matter of policy. That's all it is. It's not law, it's policy. It's decisions of elected and appointed officials whose power is largely unconstrained. And we're not members of that club. So they make those decisions until they make other ones.
It's almost just like titans clashing, like the ancient Greek sense, like those mile high monsters are fighting, and you're just a farmer looking up at them, and they're like 1,000 feet tall and punching each other.
I wish they were that impressive,
Yeah.
but I've met many of them and they are not.
Well, no, no, no. I don't
Uh,
mean that, but I mean in terms of like,
no, I understood. Yeah.
like my uncle who passed away like eight, no, like 10 years ago. But when he was 18, he was drafted to Nam. He was a hippie, drafted to Nam, and he would talk about there's just this moment of like last year I was listening to the Beatles, smoking pot on a lake, and now I'm in like a cot in Vietnam, going, what the fuck is this?
Mhm.
And you start to realize that you are kind of a single like dust particle, and there's a gust of wind, and you're going to be sucked up into that gust of wind. You're just in the wake of it. No one necessarily set out to put you there, but the forces are so large. And that's kind of how I'm looking at this. Is it seems to just be policy. It's not Biden, it's not Trump, it's this multi-trillion-dollar defense complex, and then even larger than that, like the entire kind of Western
Financiers.
civilization. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have another rising hegemon in this kind of Russia, Sino conglomerate, and it's clashing. And like the smartest thing might just be to not get pulled into the riptide.
Hmm.
And I'm conflicted in it because it kind of almost seems defeatist, but the more I look at it, the more I'm like, it's an interesting thing to talk about on the podcast. But I'm probably not going to affect any real change in it. And I hope I can, not for one side to win, but just for to stop. I'm not stupid though. I don't think I'm going to have an effect on it. Man, is there anything else to do than just kind of go make your own life? Go get a dog, and, like get married.
But I
Like,
think anybody who gives up on those things is missing out anyway, regardless of whether they're involved in the big momentous moments of history or not. There are plenty of people who forego the personal life in pursuit of the professional one, and I
yeah,
don't think they end up happy later on.
I
So
think they're miserable.
yeah, but yeah, this is all a reminder that what we're witnessing now, everything you're describing, these broad currents of these forces at play in the universe, this is the natural order of things. But for the past 30-ish years, we've been the hegemon. And so we're seeing this reemergence of the natural order upsetting sort of this brief moment of an unnatural state.
Hmm.
Um, so,
Water finding its level.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
Understanding that it'll keep sloshing around always. I mean,
yeah,
change is the constant. But yeah, there was a bit of an unnatural, well, not a bit, there was a very unnatural state of equilibrium or
yeah.
disequilibrium, rather.
You ever watch that show, like After Human or something, and it's like what would happen if humans vanished, and not because of a nuclear war or an asteroid.
Mm-hmm.
If humans just right, and
Right.
like the very first thing is like your apartment starts getting dirty, and then there are like higher order things of after 50 years bridges start to sag, and then after like 300 years buildings start to crumble, and
Mm-hmm.
you have nuclear reactors start shutting down, and all this stuff happens. And there's higher and higher orders of like the vegetation starts coming through the concrete, and when will buildings start to flex and the windows start exploding, and then how long until the exposed girders get rusted and skyscrapers start falling, and then how long until those start to the rubble starts to go out evenly, and then dust and dirt gets deposited. And if you look at that, that seems chaotic, but that's the natural state
It's a
for
reclamation. Yep.
over 99.999% of Earth's life. That we look at it as like, oh my God, it's taking over New York. Manhattan is a weird fungal growth that the Earth hasn't even noticed yet. It's a
Sure.
fly bite that in the half millisecond it takes for your nerve to tell you that a mosquito's on your arm, and you go, oh, what the fuck is that? And you hit it. We're in that nerve impulse right now, and we call it human civilization. But
Sure.
like the Earth is going, the hell's New York? And the ocean kills it. That's that's reality. And we're in this weird aberration from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't really know where I was going with that.
I have seen the program you're talking about. It
Yeah.
is very interesting.
I don't know, man. Are we the idiots for trying to insert rational observations of this? More and more so, like I was telling you before I start recording. When I get angry that my show's not working and then have to look in the mirror and go, who's the real idiot? Who's the idiot? Is the cat the idiot because it doesn't understand calculus? Or is it the person trying to teach the cat calculus? Who's the real dumbass here? The cat's licking its balls and having a great day. You're the one getting angry. So I look at it more and more and I'm like, who's the real idiot here?
Well,
What am I doing?
yeah, I think it's a question of expectations. If you say if the show's working or not, I mean, to what end, right? I think it's working in that you've created a community of people who come together and think about these things. Might not be the size you want.
Yeah. No, I mean I do enjoy the discussions. I'm like all alone. I'm like all alone with like the coolest guests in the world who all want to come on here, and like no one else wants to listen. And I'm like, is the grass just greener? If I was putting out just horse shit, there's a channel on YouTube, and I'm sure the guy's making money. I'm always making money. He's got like 20 million subscribers. I think it's just called Unbox, and
Oh
he just
yeah.
okay, right? I'm sure that guy's a fine dude. Who knows? Maybe he's well versed in geopolitical situations, and he's like, "Yeah, what are you doing? Just open up iPhone boxes. Like, look, I own a Ferrari." But I look at that, right? And I'm like, if I was in that position or I had 20 million subscribers and I'm like, today doing some weird ASMR stuff, like today we're gonna unbox the new AirPods Pro. Would I be doing that and then sitting down at the end of the day and being like, I really want to discuss the fundamental nature of empire? Is it just the grass is always at this point? I've just thrown you out the window as a cryptologist and now using you as a therapist because it's cheaper. Like, well, is the grass just greener?
I think for many people, I think it's a minority of us for whom there's actually a real passion in terms of career. Other people work because they have to. Many people would gladly just kind of get through that and go back to whatever the hell it is they want to do.
Yeah,
And if you recalibrate your perspective to say that there actually is, your audience is actually this part of it over here, not the whole. I think you would see that you're probably pretty successful.
yeah. I look at my dad, who like climbed the corporate ladder, grew up in poverty, very successful businessman, married to my mom, 4 kids, did the whole thing, raised the kids, and he went and retired. And they went and retired up into the woods in the middle of nowhere on a lake. And I go up there and you're watching the news and a new front in Ukraine's opening up and you watch it for 10 minutes and then just the remote turns it off and you just hear birds chirping. You can't even see or hear a plane. And he just goes outside and chops wood and then builds a fire. My mom knits. He has a glass of gin. They watch the Red Sox and go to bed.
I think it sounds great.
And I look at that and I go, you're a fucking genius.
Yeah, we're still in the kind of Charlottesville, Virginia area, but our next move pretty soon is off to the middle of nowhere in Appalachia.
Oh
We
yeah.
found we found
Oh,
a
yeah.
place that had fiber optic internet because it didn't have internet for years, and when it
Yeah.
finally got it, it got the good stuff.
Yeah.
And we're buying land, and I'll still be connected for work, but we're gonna raise children out there, and
Yeah.
that's how we want to live.
Yeah. I go up there and I always joke, and that's where all my extended family lives. And I always joke if there was a nuclear bomb in Boston, or let's say Portland, where I am, the closest city to them, they would only know because there'd be a glow on the horizon.
Sure.
They are so excluded from and so self sufficient, and they all look out for each other. Everyone knows how to hunt. They all have well water. They've got heavy machinery. And growing up, I always would look at it and be like, man, I'm so happy I live in a city, and the rest of my family's kind of out in the boonies. And now I'm looking at it like, how much more money do I need before I get out there?
Yeah,
And I'm like, what am
that's
I?
the goal. Yeah.
Yeah. You go out there and you're like, what do you think about the Ukraine war? And they're like, who's that? And you're like, hell yeah. Like, you're like this, just not even disconnected or disillusioned in the sense of like eating a Big Mac and drinking yourself to sleep. I just mean all like raising families and just chopping wood and hunting.
It
Like,
puts things in perspective. If you unplug for a while and then plug back in, you'll realize that what you missed didn't matter to you.
oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. The
Like,
delete Twitter for a week and then download it again and note what happens to you when you start scrolling
mhm.
instantly. Fights, war, rape. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It feels weird. And you're like, you feel like you just smoked crack. You're like, my heart's racing. I'm like, I'm kind of anxious. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, one of my hobbies is basically motorcycle touring, but adventure motorcycling, the on-road, off-road stuff where
Oh,
you
yeah.
load up the bike with camping gear and just
Hell
kind of
yeah.
make off toward the sunset. And I love it because I don't really usually even have a destination. I
Yeah.
just say I'm going to leave and I need to be back on like this certain day,
Yeah.
and there's no agenda, just
Yeah.
roaming around, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's bliss. And I guess to maybe like, make it full circle and we can wrap up with this is when you see those little communities that sure have all their own, that doesn't mean heartache doesn't exist, doesn't mean there isn't still cancer or people dying or your dog dies or your wife cheats, like all that, the same human drama happens there. It's not like it's some utopia. But in terms of the general people just kind of working and then enjoying the weekend with people they love and people that look out for one another, everyone knows their neighbors. I don't know a single person in this apartment building, let alone this city. I
Hmm.
know like the security at the front door.
It's a very atomized way of living. Yeah.
And then you go up there, and if someone's snowmobile gets stuck, everyone's out there, and they'll find out if it's incredible. It doesn't matter what happens. They'll go out there and they'll make a party of it too. They'll bring some moonshine. They'll get like a winch, a chainsaw, and next thing it's like a whole gathering. And then like the community building of that, and everyone knows you're always there for one another, and you can always lean on one another. And you realize that that community is probably more similar to the average tribe in Afghanistan or group of people in Ukraine or average peasant in China, and that they just kind of want that too. Now, how would you feel if you were in that little community and some imperial force came in? You'd probably give anything to kill that force.
Sure.
And it's kind of a sobering way to look at it. Not defending terrorists or, whatever the fuck, not to get myself on yet another list, but yeah.
Yeah, I was a targeter in Afghanistan, so it was my job to find insurgents essentially.
Mhm.
And this is where the beginning of my disillusionment is rooted, because about halfway through my first deployment there, I realized that the people we were after not only had nothing to do with New York and Washington, they couldn't find those places on a map
Yeah.
because they didn't understand maps. They didn't understand the two-dimensional depiction of space. And that was, I came home on whatever it was, mid-tour leave, turn on the news, and it sounded very different here.
Mm.
And then go back there, and um, yeah, that's when I realized I needed to do something else. It took a
Some of
while, but
some of the like tier one operators I've talked to are like, yeah, it's a weird moment when you go meet like a local chieftain and you're explaining to them, you got to win hearts and minds. So we're here because of 9/11, and they don't know what 9/11 is. And
absolutely.
and so you show them a video of what happened to New York, and they don't know what New York is,
Mhm.
and they don't know what the United States is. Not that they don't know where it is. They're like, oh, well, oh, is that where you're from? Is it nice there? And you go, what am I doing here?
Mhm. I've had many such experiences. That's
Yeah, and I'm friends with some guys that did targeting for reapers and predators, and they're like, and after a while, you're like, dude, that guy is just on the unlucky. I go home to my wife and kids, and that guy is not going home to his wife, and the only difference is I'm on the side that has the IR cameras, and you're like, it's almost a universal lesson I've learned from, and again, ironically enough, not tree hugging hippies, but a bunch of guys who have served, who will, without batting an eye, will tell you like, yeah, dude, it's not. It is bad. It's
yeah.
not.
Unless you're a sociopath, psychopath, or you have just such low cognitive abilities that you can't imagine these things,
Yeah,
I think that's the normal reaction.
yeah, and I think it's okay to go into it, you know, believing either propaganda. I went to college and got into medical school. Very likely, you take someone as kind of like jacked up OCD intense as I am. I could have absolutely gone and joined the military, and look at my friends that joined, and they're like the same age as me, but they didn't have a dad that put them through private school, so instead they went to the Marines. I think that's a fine and probably normal thing to get pulled into that, and to think you're doing a generally good thing. Like, I'm defending my country. What's wrong with that? And I completely get that. And I also think it's an okay experience to go through it, probably mull it over in your head multiple times, then finally realize you're like, I don't think this is for me. I think that's a normal human experience. It's it's the people that are just detached from that, that you're like, oh, oh, you're evil. Yeah, yeah. You will bulldoze all of Ukraine just cause.
Yeah, they are indeed, and they will,
Yeah.
and they'll just move on to something else.
That'll just be the next thing.
Yep.
I mean, we're out of Kabul for like 8 months.
Yeah, no one even talks about it. It hasn't been two
No,
years.
no. We just skip
Yeah.
from one thing. Like, Joe Biden got us out of the Middle East without blinking an eye. It's Slava Ukrainian. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
oh.
there was COVID normalization, and then there was another,
It
then
just,
there was a war. Yeah.
and so what do? I think you move up into the mountains and just chop wood. I think,
Well, on the other hand, I mean, somebody has to kind of lead and maintain society. I don't think it's
Yeah.
all for nothing.
No, it's not. And
Yeah,
if you completely bury your head, the evil will come knocking on your door. You can't.
it'll find you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, man. Maybe the smartest thing to do is to just interview a bunch of strippers and say, "What type are you?" and get 300,000 views an hour. I don't. I My favorite thing to imagine is that these guys that have these shows aren't stupid, but that like they subscribe to my podcast and they're watching this and they're discussing
Yeah.
it. They're like,
They go home and read Nietzsche.
yeah, no, exactly. I love
Yeah.
the idea that they're watching this. Like, I completely understand where Lee's coming from. And, there is a maintenance of empire that any Westphalian nature needs. And they're like, all right, we got a show at 8 and it's welcome to the show. Are you a tits guy or an ass guy tonight? And you're like, oh, those guys are geniuses. And I hope to maybe be welcomed into their arms one day.
Hey, maybe it's just a gig for some of them, a
I
very well
think
paying
it,
gig.
I think it probably is. I would love to be welcomed into their arms and they pat me on the head and I look on their bookshelves and it's they're like, "Oh, you listen to Dan Carlin too?" They're like, "Oh, I love his Celtic Holocaust bit." And I'm like,
Oh, that was good.
I
Yeah.
go, "Oh, I'm home. I'm home. What are we talking about tonight?" They're like, "We're talking about platinum blonde hair." And I'm like, "Let's do it." But yeah, I'm
Maybe
not
you've reached
gonna
a fork in the road.
I think is that full enlightenment? I think that maybe is full enlightenment.
It's
Uh,
self-actualization. Yeah.
that is the that is the that's the end. That's when you'll know I've finally hit nirvana. Is when I start covering ass injections instead of the war in Ukraine. That is, if you see that episode, you'll go, Tommy's descended. He's finally there.
And perhaps happier. We don't
Yeah,
know.
I'll be fat wearing a big Buddhist robe, and you'll be like, "There's a glow coming from this."
Down on the beach somewhere.
Oh yeah, just. I'm like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? Don't. What are you?" Yeah. Anyway, um, thank you for that discussion of geopolitics and existential crisis that I'm clearly going through. Clearly going through, and
You can make it. You
it
can
takes
make
it
it.
takes a brave man to sit through this. Some people would be like, "Hey, let's get back on topic," but I applaud you for just leaning in. And yeah, guys, if you want to go for all of your consulting needs, go to BT Consulting. If you need a helicopter, go visit Mike Durant's company.
That's
And
right.
yeah, Pinnacle Solutions. If you need a new helicopter, and yeah, go follow him on Twitter. And yeah, man, thanks for your time. And as always, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Good talking to you, Tommy. Take
Thank
care.
you, Lee. Guys, thank you so much for watching.